Hello everyone. Hope you're having a great day. Thank you very much for joining this very important discussion. The unprecedented progress of generative AI and its astounding capabilities have left all of us breathless, bewildered, and overwhelmed. On the one hand, Gen AI is being seen as more than just a great productivity hack, and on the other, individual employees and enterprises are exploring how to prepare for the world of Gen AI. And it is to address these questions that we have organized this webinar under nasscom's Future of Work initiative. To introduce the panelists for today's discussion. Our first panelist is Anandaru Ghosh, or Andy as he is called, who is a partner with Deloitte Human Capital Consulting, and he leads the workforce transformation service line. He has almost 20 years of professional experience across a range of areas in HR advisory. Prior to Deloitte, Andy headed Aon's performance, rewards, and organization consulting practice across India, Middle East, and Southeast Asia. Our next panelist is an innovator, futurist, author, TEDx speaker, father, and a dog lover. He is Nikhil Malhotra, Chief Innovation Officer and creator of Makers Lab, a unique incubator within Tech Mahindra. Nikhil has over 22 years of experience, and he is a World Economic Forum AI Fellow working on responsible AI and quantum ethics. From Atlassian, we have Ranjani Mani, who is the Global Analytics and Data Sciences Leader. She has over 15 years of experience in setting up and growing global data science teams, building design for deployment analytics, including customer-facing AI product capabilities. Her interests lie in solving user problems through building analytic capabilities, product strategy, and leadership. She's a mentor at nasscom Deep Tech Club and Kerala Startup Mission as well. She also hosts a podcast called Generative AI and I. And finally, we have Sandeep Alur, Director, Microsoft Technology Center, Microsoft Corporation India. As a technology leader, Sandeep heads Microsoft Technology Center, an experience center focusing on helping customers accelerate their digital transformation journey. A passionate techie and an evangelist at heart, he loves technologies that have a profound impact on human lives. A thought leader, trusted advisor, and a meticulous implementer, he believes that the next big leap in data science and the power of generative AI will elevate customer experience to greater heights. And finally, Sangeeta Gupta, she is Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer at nasscom, and she'll be moderating this session. Sangeeta, over to you.
Thank you so much, Diksha, and a very warm welcome to all the panelists who joined here today. We have a very diverse group of leaders with very diverse backgrounds, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion. As Diksha mentioned, I think we're living in these very interesting times where we've never seen a technology wave that has created so much excitement and yet so much fear, right? So I think as nasscom, our focus is to say, how do we demystify this for our industry, for the larger community at large, and also help India emerge as a key stakeholder in this whole generative AI space as we take it forward. So to kickstart this conversation, maybe Sandeep, I can start with you, the creator in some ways, how Microsoft has really pioneering the movement of, chatgpt plus Bing and creating a whole new world of how we work. Tell us about how you were thinking about this whole movement. What are the opportunities it's throwing up? How do you see some interesting use cases that can be more relevant from an enterprise centricity? Because we've seen all the use cases of ChatGPT passing these exams and all the different individual use cases. But love to hear from you. How do you think about it from a very enterprise lens, and why is this different, right, in many ways?
Awesome. Sangeeta, first of all, thanks for hosting me this afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here. So quickly, I think if any of you heard the recent Sam Altman's Senate hearing, the term used when question answer happened was, is this a printing press moment, right? So truly, we're in that era where it's disruptive. We've never seen a reasoning brain like this before. See, a lot of people look at generative AI or a chat GPT as a Q&A agent or a fact-checking database. It's not that. It's actually reasoning brain. So the way forward is, how do we take this highly trained, pre-trained reasoning brain, which is, as you rightly said, passed bar exam in the US. It is at the 90th percentile on SAT, GPT-4 specifically. How do we take this innovation and meaningfully apply to enterprise scenarios? As Microsoft, we believe in this design thinking called Copilot, because all these days, AI has been there in the autopilot mode. Even in this call we're on today, if there's a focus coming on me while I'm speaking, there is AI behind the scenes. If there is translation, I have the AI behind the scenes. So we don't control it. But going forward, with generative AI, wherever you see a role for a natural language task, you can actually bring this reasoning brain into the foray, right? So the way forward is, we look at industry verticals, we look at personas, be it a doctor, be it a lawyer, be it a creative writer or a developer, right? Is there a way we can bring this reasoning brain between that persona and the work they do? The sole intent here is to make them productive. How can I make them productive? Help them do things faster, better, and more efficient fashion. I think that's where this innovation comes in, Sangeeta. But my only ask of everybody is, look at this not as a fact-checking large language model, but look at this as a pre-trained reasoning brain. That means you can apply this with no further training required from your end on your data, right? The brain on your data is the future of enterprises.
So if I just build on that, Sandeep, I mean, you've talked about your data and pre-trained data. That means for enterprises to use it effectively, they will first need to invest in building their own pre-trained models, or does technology help them in that way also?
Oh, no, let me clarify. This needs no pre-training, no further training. So this is pre-trained model. You don't see the way you approach this is, there's a reasoning brain which comes in with its known knowledge to reason with you. That means it does not need your data to get better at reasoning. It's highly trained. You don't need fine-tuning approach to be taken at all when it comes to using this in your enterprise scenario. So, which is a lot of questions we get from customers saying, "Hey, is it need for me to fine-tune this?" No need to fine-tune at all. It's there. It's there, right there, in front of us. So just use it. And by the way, this model doesn't take your data at all for any purposes, right? Well, ChatGPT takes data for training and evaluation purposes, but the underlying models inherently they're closed loop, right? They don't take your data in at all. So rest assured that enterprise data is secure. You will reason with your data in a more secure fashion. These models are pre-trained, hence no training required. And apply this model on your data so that you can unearth insights, which otherwise is practical and possible in natural language. Natural language reasoning on your data in a more secure fashion, no training required.
Ranjini, if I was to come to you, right, to build on what Sandeep said, the reasoning model that is now existing, how do you think about use cases from an enterprise lens that can be very relevant to help achieve the objectives of whether it's productivity or augmentation that we define it, right?
Absolutely. And honestly, there's just such exciting stuff happening here, right? So before I kind of get to like B2B enterprise use cases, first of all of these are personal views, right? I'll talk a bit about why I'm bullish, why is it different this time, and then kind of touch upon what you asked, where is it headed, right? Like Sandeep said, he said printing press moment. I introduced this as the iPhone moment, right? It's changed the way business models and changed the way we communicate it in itself. And one of your poll questions was around ChatGPT, and I think everyone said it was 100%. So it surpassed like 1 million users in 5 days. So when any new technology consumes so much of attention, our first question is it really like as valuable as such, right? A A16Z article put it this way, and I absolutely share the belief that the answer for that is like an undoubtedly yes, right? I strongly believe that generative AI will be the next major platform upon which founders will build like category defining products, and not just new category of products, right? I think it will supercharge existing ones, making it easier to scale. Then the second part, like why is it different this time compared to like traditional AI? We've been doing this for a long time, right? So traditionally, machine learning in mainstream products specifically has been discriminative, right? In the sense that they could discriminate between different types of data. like classification, right? Like this is the image of a cat, 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 cat. So it classifies it, right? So versus in generative AI, where you're creating data, which means it comes close to mimicking human quality output. And now in terms of where is it headed? I think Sam Altman put this really well. I think he said that in 2010, if you were to like forecast and say, where will this go? We all assume that, oh, it'll come from like the white collar jobs first, and then it'll go to the creative jobs, right? AI cannot replace creativity. But then if you think about how it's kind of unraveling itself, it appears far easier to automate rather difficult creative tasks than it is for simple programming tasks, right? Like, and I'll tell you why. So let's take two use cases, right? Like image generation versus code generation. So one big reason is when it comes to like correct versus creative work, in like code generation, accuracy is really important. Like you can't have changes in that, right? So while code generation can happen, human still needs to validate and vet it. So there is a human in the loop which is required. Versus creative tasks where you can have there's more slack, right? And therefore there is more, okay, you can bring in creative models, which is until it is complete to a large extent. So then how does it impact enterprises, right? So one thing I'd love for this audience to think about is B2B versus B2C scenarios. In B2C, which is consumer-facing scenarios, again, because of this lack of not near accuracy required, like say you're saying, I'm talking to a celebrity like Steve Jobs, right? It's okay. You're not going to say, okay, this is not accurate. Versus in a B2B scenario, that is really important. So I think in B2B scenarios, the use cases are going to be more coaching or as Sandeep called out, co-pilot kind of areas where there is need for human, there is need for proprietary data, there is need for human context that is going to be required versus B2C where it's still different, right? It can still be used or automated. Like say think about a tomato sorter, right? Is it ripe, not ripe? That can be automated. Data entry, that can be automated. Versus B2B, which requires more of human in the loop and context. So I think that's where it's headed. That's what will determine the roles which will be automated or not as well. And I think we should talk a bit more about that. But I'll summarize it with that, right? That in enterprises, it would play more of a coaching kind of role. I think coaching network is a framework I heard somewhere, but versus B2C, where it would be closer to automation.
Great point, Ranjini. Nikhil, if I was to come to you, I know I've heard you in another session where you talked about how within the enterprise deployment, while hype curves are very strong, a lot of conversations around generative AI taking place, but deployment is definitely lagging, and the 100 million figure that we all quote on ChatGPT does not have any comparable in the enterprise. But how are you thinking about it from an enterprise lens, and what are some of the early adoption of use cases where you think at least there's some initial acceptance of what we're looking for?
No, I think thank you, Sangeeta, first for having me on this. And I know I've stopped calling myself as Chief Innovation Officer after ChatGPT, and Sandeep is to blame for it. So for all reasons, but I think just keeping myself on the enterprise lens, I think I've been researching on NLP for the last 10, 15 odd years, right? And Ranjini has said it. Sandeep has said it. This is exactly the moment where we could see it create language. We've actually done this in the past as well. We have done this using recurrent neural networks. We've done this using LSTM. But I think what the real crux, or if I could go to the seminal movement, it's not today, which is 2023, it's 2017 when Transformers did evaluate and Vaswani and the others really built out that transformer model, which really got to what we are today. From an enterprise scale, I think something is happening, right? So, and that something is because we can now see AI perform near human task in terms of conversation. 2 or 3 regions are really shifting. One is enterprise search. I think that's the biggest change that is happening from an enterprise perspective. Search has gone through a lot of changes in terms of being elastic, in training databases, in doing in fragmentation and segmentation. But suddenly search has now become more generative. And the reason why search is the first topic to be picked up by each enterprise is there are hundreds of examples where they can be used. You in internal IT, you have documents, you have your data, but they don't have the information when they search on their web, internal information. Call center executives, a call comes and lands onto your piece. You want to find out information correctly to save your AHT and average handling time. You search for a lot of pieces across. This could happen very easily in terms of what you're doing for an enterprise search, right? And the other thing why enterprise search is gaining prominence is it uses both, as Ranjini said, it uses both discriminative to find out where your information is and then generate on top of it in a much more contextual manner of what you need as an information, right? Picking up the right pieces over there. Second, where we are seeing a lot of use cases come in is recommender systems, right? There was a time when we've built recommender systems before, we can plant it with templates, but now with ChatGPT and with generative AI coming, recommender systems are becoming much more better in terms of recommendation, not just for that particular task, but you can feed in some other feature sets to actually give you the next best recommendation as well. Healthcare, I think, is bound to change. Life services, for example. Now, with this generative AI to the core that we have, I can now perform a very important task of chemistry simulations or simulations around my molecules as well. Something which is a bane for the healthcare and life sciences industry, right? To generate or to find out a drug molecule, you need about 15 odd years or 12 odd years, and you want to spend about $2.5 billion. This can become better in terms of simulation scenarios that I can now generate using imagery, I can use text, I can do that, right? Analytics or dashboarding, for example, right? Your management or senior management doesn't understand charts, but can I explain these charts in much more easier contextual format using generative AI or using simple text? Those are examples that are largely coming in. But there are other use cases. For example, generation of imagery, for example, in media and entertainment, if you look at an enterprise, a format of generation which is also called NERF, which is the neural radial field, and you generating more imagery out of your 2D images is another option which is coming up in sports area. So there are hundreds of these examples which just with one advent of ChatGPT has just opened up the world to say, look, we can generate a lot more rather than just discriminate, right, in terms of the AI. So those are some use cases which are coming up.
Very, very, very interesting examples, Nikhil. And if I was to come to you, right, Deloitte is a very large consulting company, and you must be seeing a lot of interest from your enterprise clients saying, tell us, what does this mean for you? So I'd love to get your perspectives on what are you seeing on the ground, and especially from an India lens, are you seeing anything different?
Thank you very much for having me here, and also this question. And also I was listening to Sandeep, Ranjani, and Nikhil, and I was thinking that I'm a complete Luddite, or half the terms I probably don't even understand what's being discussed here. So pardon my ignorance and in my answers as well. Like Sandeep was mentioning, I think there is a massive amount of interest, but I think it's not very directed interest yet, in the sense that everybody is in the ChatGPT wave more than anything else, and therefore there is a lot of the pop culture is dictating a lot of the interest today with regard to what you can do with regard to with generative AI. Amongst our client base, there are two kinds of questions I think that we largely see. One is to basically say that how can you improve your own work in serving us using some of this kind of technology, and is there a way in which you can use that technology? And I'm guessing at some level it will also pertain to say, therefore, how are you improving your own productivity, etc. The other is in terms of their own applications as to what kind of tools or bots can get added to the applications that you're already running to be able to use generative AI or be able to use some level of functionality within generative AI. Now, and the other big thing right now is and I think but in the domestic space, particularly in India, I think the understanding so far isn't as strong right now to be for structured questions to come our way. And I think that's where fundamentally this rests, that you do not have a situation where people have genuine real-world applications, day-to-day real-world applications for which they are asking you to plug and start operating on a particular system. I know Sandeep was mentioning that he's running tons of workshops. And I'm actually curious to know that in all of these workshops, are they translating into people saying that, so here are the 5 things that I'll go back to work and start doing with technology, with this new technology. And that's, I think, where I'm keen to understand it. Is it really there, or are we still at a point where we're still marveling at what it can do vis-a-vis actually getting things done?
Yeah. I know Sandeep is actually, when he did a workshop for us, he'd shown some use cases. So love to get your perspective, Sandeep. So.
Absolutely. I think, Andy, very valid, I would say, a narrative there. Here is my reflection, right? Earlier we said we have been hosting good number of customers at Tech Center day in and day out. I think largely industry is fascinated or bitten by the ChatGPT's capability. It's like human-like, never people experience. It's like a wow moment, right? As I said earlier, for the first time, somebody gave UI to AI, and hence people are able to appreciate it. Right? So now the point is, okay, how do I take this meaningfully to my business? Nobody knows that yet, right? That means, Andy, to your point, industry largely is on the trail where they're telling us, hey, educate us. How do we navigate the next trail, right? What use cases are practically possible? Now, our approach, that we take on the ground when we host customers is anybody for that matter who wants to walk this trail is, first of all, we'll get them acquainted with what we call as art of the possible. Understand what is this innovation all about. Forget use cases. Use cases, you're the best master because you know domain, it will come in. But understand, to make them understand it's a reasoning engine takes time, because people always want to ask question and get, hey, did CSK win yesterday? I mean, why do you need a chat GPT for that? It's an expensive call because it's a large language model. You can just go check it anywhere. Or should I invest in the stock tomorrow? Because they also think there's a predictive engine. It's not, right? So it takes time to understand that what it is not and what it is, number one. Making them understand this, I think the next task is, of course, we talk about how do you identify natural language tasks, and hence this come in handy. So they go back. The first trail is, long story short, majority of the industry right now is at the getting acquainted phase. Few have progressed in identifying use cases. A smaller fraction of them have gone into production. For example, Myntra, last week, they went live with My Fashion GPT, right? That means I should be able to naturally ask, hey, I'm attending a wedding next day in the coming week. It's a Bengali wedding. Can you recommend some, Bengali, whatever, right? Natural language question, it throws you some stuff. So very few have gone to production, but largely people are in the getting acquainted phase. Yeah.
Yeah, no, good example. Thinking, as you are helping your global customers think through, what can be some potential use cases, how are you helping them think about preparing for this scenario, right? Do you have a playbook for them, or how are you guiding them through that initiative?
I mean, that's a great question, Sangeeta. So what we are doing is I'm on the other side of Sandeep, right? When you go and visit his tech center, he'll tell you what the technology is. When a customer comes to me, I have to tell him what the use case is, right? So, because I'll have to fit my technology to that use case. So I think what we are essentially looking with customers is, what's your eventual objective in a use case? It could be AI, which is older. It could be the new generative AI. But you have to tell us what that final objective of a use case would be, so that we can actually plant ourselves and say, this is where generative AI comes in. In some scenarios, customers are well informed, and they do come us with some brilliant examples of use cases which can be solved only through generative AI. And I can give you some of these examples, saying, people coming in saying, look, I am from lead to opportunity, create an automatic price quote. Can generative AI do that? Great example. Now I have to collect those features to figure out how do I fit in technology over here. Sometimes customer confuse, as Sandeep said, customers do confuse between generative and discriminative AI, right? So if they want to figure out, look, can you give me a prediction whether this order is going to fall out or not? Generative AI do that. And my answer plainly to them is, this is not a task for generative AI. This is a task for discriminative AI. Let it do its own stuff. So we have a playbook. We even internally, we have actually built a generative AI studio of our own to tell people that these are examples that you can use with code, text, image, etc. And lastly, we do get into nitty-gritty to show them what are some of the other things that we are doing with our customers, right? So post this hype, we already are working with 6 of our customers in making these use cases. So we tell them, look, these are examples. These are examples in insurance space. These are examples in telecom space. These are examples that we're doing. This is where generative AI is actually coming in. But eventually it drops down to the use case facet, Sangeeta. That's what we are essentially trying to do with customers.
Great points. And I think with that, I'll move to the second part of this discussion, which is really around what does generative AI do to the future of work? And Andy, since you specialize largely on workforce compensation and related issues, I want to start with you, right? I think Sandeep mentioned Sam Altman saying this is the printing press moment it can be a printing press moment for the world. And I heard Yuval Harari saying a printing press moment a printing press does not do anything on its own. It needs a human to tell you what to do, right? So how do you think about this whole human and machine interface, and what will that do to the workforce, particularly? And I'll come back to the talent question around, especially the technology talent piece. But how are you thinking about this?
I think this is our perspective. Globally, I've seen Deloitte talk about this uniformly across countries. Is that a lot of this technology always will be working with humans and not against, or taking away jobs from humans. And to be, I mean, it's easy to see. There are two camps right now, right? There's this one camp that is going to be yelling from top of the voices about the fact that X million or X 100,000 jobs will go away, etc., etc. And some fantastic numbers will be thrown about. Now, and if I look at a lot of this data, and I can't really tell how they have arrived at that number, because that number is the headline, but what goes behind that number doesn't seem to be very clear. So that's one camp. And the other camp will be very blasé about it, to say, oh, nothing will change, it will be the same. Now, obviously, the answer lies somewhere in the middle. The fact is that there will be, if you look at history, and I find this very interesting, the thing that if you look at the job of the London Underground drivers, the metro drivers, they are some of the best paid government servants in UK. But the fact is that the London Metro can be driven with technology, and that technology has been in existence for many decades. So the fact that there is technology does not mean that the human will not be operating the technology or not be interfacing with the technology. That's, I think, the first part. And I think a lot of the adoption of generative AI will also increase once people start realizing that this is not an either-or kind of situation, but an and kind of a one. But the bigger thing is, and once we get behind the whole conversation about the fact that there is going to be massive job losses, etc., the bigger thing is the question of how do you prepare for the new world? I think that's the better question to ask for all of us than to say that what is the percentage of jobs that will be lost. And there, I think, particularly from an India context, I think we have a larger problem, and we can talk about this as we go through the conversation a bit more. But how do you prepare your workforce to be more technology sensitive and technology enabled? I think is a bigger question to answer for our country going forward. A lot of this kind of technology, and I'm looking at this as a slightly broader brush to say generative AI as one technology tool that will have an impact on jobs, etc. But there'll be others that will come along the way, and it's a question of and no one technology will completely, at least I'm hopeful, will not take away all jobs or will not make people redundant. Politically, socially, these things don't happen. Right? I mean, historically, this has never happened in this way, so I'm assuming it won't happen going forward as well. But skilling and the change of how you make people ready for this technology, I think the bigger question.
I think there's a big debate whether what happened in the past is true now. So, while history is a good indicator of the future, but you cannot take it for granted, right? And then I think with that, Ranjini, I'm going to come to you. You run this podcast on AI and me, and I think that's the most important question, right? About how, will there be a divide between people who use AI and people who don't use AI? There will be AI builders, which is a very different league of people, and we'll come to that. But people who use AI in their day-to-day tasks, and people who don't, will there be a significant divide? And how do you see that pan out, right? Is that likely to be a differentiator, or like some of the jobs that Andy talked about, like the London Underground, is not going to go away, right? So how are you seeing this whole workforce or worker shift taking place?
Absolutely. I think we tend to, as humans, seek one or the other. Does this happen or will this happen, right? But truth lies somewhere in shades of green. So first of all, yes, generative AI has potential to replace some of the job roles. It will complement some others, and it will create new roles as well. The number of new things which I come across, Sangeeta, I think maybe a month ago, I came across this new, not the prompt engineer, there's actually a marketplace for prompt engineering. You can go and buy prompts across use cases, across LLMs. So there are absolutely new things which is coming up, right? So before we talk about what roles, I would love for us and for the audience to understand where AI can be more effective, where are humans more effective, and then what are the guidelines we should probably all question ourselves when we think about, is my job going to go away, right? So generative AI today isn't really consistently accurate. It isn't very outcome tied, and it isn't very context specific. And I'll talk a bit more about that, right? And we did allude earlier that, versus B2B, B2C applications have a higher hurdle to clear. So what does this mean, right? Therefore, when AI plays the role of a coach, humans have a very strong role to play. They are absolutely required. There is the human in the loop. That's why it's called a co-pilot in that sense, right? So then it begs the question, what processes will AI automate? So there are certain, probably some rules, so to speak, where it could automate away portions of the job, freeing up valuable time and resources that we can focus on things that matter, right? And that's what tends to happen. Like, if we think about it historically also, when the printing press came in, or when the calculator came in, it removed away redundant parts, which we could then focus on other things, right? So it's more of parts of your job or task which can go away versus jobs in itself which can go away. That's one thing to look at, right? Now, I would call these as static processes, and three things to think about with respect to every role, right? First of all, are they like, do you work with limited static set of inputs to determine outputs, right? So for example, if you're looking at tomatoes and saying, oh, this is right, oh, this is not right, right? Like, if you're just looking at this and saying yes or no, that is probably a very static process, right? If the associated rewards are linear and not exponential, so if you are picking tomatoes, like I pick versus one other person picks, the other person is not going to pick 100x what I pick, right? Like, the rewards are not different, very different. It's going to be very linear that way, right? And then it's very object-centric. So if my job involves connecting with 10 other folks and trying to bring things together, ideas together, that requires a human to put creativity. But if it's very object-centric, if all I'm doing is inputting numbers into a machine, that is very object-centric. That's again static. So largely, if it falls under static areas, those are with linear rewards and very object-centric processes. Like data entry or transcription, they are more likely to get automated. Not jobs, so tasks are more likely to be automated. And if 100% of your job is that is definitely areas which could be automated, right? So I think that's a good mental framework to think about when we talk about will this be gone or not, right? But then on the other hand, generative AI is highly likely to complement roles that require creativity, problem solving, critical thinking, right? Think about it in terms of any role. As a product manager also, right? Or any of these roles could benefit from bringing in AI. So I think the question we need to ask ourselves is not like whether this will go away or not, my job will go away or not, but rather what tasks or what processes can be automated, whereas where can I upskill and bring myself up to speed so that it can work in tandem. So definitely, to your initial point, someone who uses AI will definitely replace someone who doesn't, right? That's something, it's a cliche, but I think that rings true to me as well to conclude.
Yeah. So Sandeep, you talked of the co-pilot, and that's obviously the word co-pilot suggests it's an assistant or an augmentation tool. But as that spans out and assuming deployment at scale takes place, how do you think it will reshape the workforce, right? It won't be the same workforce we've been used to, or growing in the same numbers that we've been used to.
Yeah. By the way, Ranjini made a great point in terms of who would replace who. Very valid. Also, I would say the world is overreacting right now because, as Andy said earlier, where are these numbers coming from? We've got to wait and watch. But it's still early stages. They're foreseeing a huge potential, and then they're reacting right now, which is fair. But here's the thing. I'm going to bring an example here. The moment that we have here is, let's say all of us are driving. I used to driving Maruti 800. Yeah, it is very simple. There's only a gear and a clutch and a steering wheel. Now suddenly somebody gives a Ferrari, right? You'll have to learn, how do I best use this vehicle so that I reap the benefits from this vehicle, or use the fullest. I would say the industry would start with driving Ferrari like 800. That won't work. You'll have to understand how to best use this. So that means, reskilling becomes central for us to stay productive and also to look at this innovation meaningfully at work. The new, I would say, trail emerging is, I'm sure you would have heard, prompt engineering, right? By the way, I must admit, some of us in Microsoft got access to a Copilot. Of course, in SharePoint, we're just looking at that. And my colleague, asked a very brilliant question. Response was fascinating. I couldn't ask that question. Same document, by the way, right? So what does this tell us? So it's the same thing as in a search engine. Each of us, Sangeeta, imagine you're searching for a common thing. You go and come back with a search link in 30 seconds. I'm still searching. That means you probably have a better, I would say, right keywords that you put in, you got the response back. So this innovation is real for sure. This is absolutely real. The question is, how do we empower people to use it to the fullest at their work so that their work is more meaningful, right? Today, we all understand data is omnipresent, insights are elusive. Now, can I unknow those insights using natural language prompts, right? And again, somebody said this. In fact, my boss Shashi at Mike said this. Future is you don't have to be educated to stay productive. You have to be intelligent to stay productive. That means how smartly you can ask questions is how meaningfully this innovation comes in handy for you. That's so true. So I would say there is a level of upskilling required to understand this innovation. You don't have to worry about what's running. Just, how do I meaningfully kind of, we talk about hyper automation. I think they're also getting hyper in terms of, everything is going to go away. No, it's not going to go away. It's a question of how do you augment human ingenuity? All these co-pilots we're talking about on a scale of 1 to 8, it will take us to 6 or 7. 8, 9, 10 is my creativity, I would say, intelligence to be applied to complete the task. And we say the term called, AI and jobs. No, this co-pilot is meant to do tasks, not a job. So a job has 100 tasks to be done. I'll hand off 10 to AI and focus on 90. That's future.
Yeah. No, I think you make some very interesting points, Sandeep, and while you talked about creativity and intelligence that somehow can make a lot of people think they're not creative, they're not intelligent enough. So, what's the future for them? I think another interesting example I'd read in the Microsoft or AI for Bharat blog was about a lesser intelligent call center agent, right? And how they were getting the right feedback from the Copilot or the ChatGPT to help them address their customer queries. So it can actually also make people who may be slightly less qualified to actually do a job as well as somebody who may be better qualified. So I think there is opportunity on both sides as long as we know how to use it, right? I think that's the most important. Nikhil, if I was to come to you, right, how are you thinking of it from a software coder's perspective, right?
So look, I think they've all said how the world is changing. I'm actually giving a different term. I've now started calling people not as full stack engineers, but full stack evangelists. So
this industry loves jargon.
Yeah. So how do you actually evangelize from the front end to the back end? And I've got some brilliant examples in my lab. In my lab, there are people with certain research value and certain way of looking at things, right? People who work at the back end would continue to work with data. People who work at front end would continue to work in design and creative space, etc. So one of these girls, I actually asked, she's a back-end engineer. She knows how to work with data. She wants to operate it. I said, why don't you show this, on a piece of page, a web page, where I can see a kind of dashboard, right? And she doesn't know HTML. She doesn't know CSS. She's got no clue. And Pat came a reply, should I try ChatGPT? And I said, try ChatGPT, try GitHub Copilot, give me something. And within 2 hours, we had a dashboard ready. Now, what that has done, to Ranjani's point and to Sandeep's point, it's actually improved proficiency where somebody was lacking, right? It was the right point where an interjection was made. We knew that she had qualifications for the backend. She doesn't have qualifications for the front end, but this is what this technology is actually putting it forth. From a coder's perspective, what I have seen, and I have worked extensively on GitHub Copilot, and we're trying it again and again. If you're a brilliant coder, it'll improve, and we're actually about to give a paper. It will improve your efficiency by about 20 to 30%. If you're an experienced coder, because you would know where you have to stop the prompts from GitHub Copilot that comes onto your Visual Studio, and you know where to stop that code. You know how to take that code and put it somewhere else. If you're an average coder, we're seeing that you would improve your efficiency by about 10%. Because you don't know how the codes that come out, where do you stop it, right? Sometimes because it's generative, because there's an element of hallucination sometimes, the code continues to go in a loop in the GitHub Copilot, and you have to stop it and say, look, I know where the code is. That's what I want to make sure is the objective, and I have to stop there. If you're a very, very early novice coder, this appears magical. That you can suddenly write a prompt and it will come out, right? So it's that level of technical intelligence, if you may build up, over a period of time, this becomes a tool for you to get help, right? So I coded an entire Super Mario game in less than 10 minutes, right? Because I knew where to stop, I knew what to do with the game. But if I give it to a person who's less experienced in gaming or who could do this, he would take a longer period of time. Having said that, we've seen some challenges with GitHub Copilot when it comes to an already written code, because there it gets confused a lot. There you need a big experience in terms of domain and also people who are trying to use this within the code sector. So it's good in some places. It's also not so good in certain places. But that's how technology is. It's got its own pros and cons. What I just want to end up with is, this is not the be all end all of AI. What ChatGPT and generative AI has actually shown us is that there's much more promise for AI in the future. And there are already alternative routes being taken, right? Graph neural networks is one way, recurrent neural networks, neuroscience inspired AI, all of them somehow have now been given that leap of faith by generative AI, saying, look, there is a value attached to a new format of AI, which we human beings can use, right? So that's the biggest change that I see in my community, which is happening. Sorry, Sandeep, go ahead.
Sangeeta, I just wanted to make one point. Ranjini made this point. I want to kind of re-emphasize that everything that we have right now is not 100% accurate, by the way, right? You know, what output we're getting may be inaccurate, and hence human will not go up. You know, you have to validate. Nikhil said hallucination. Yes, at times it does. GPT-4 as a model is an isolated model, but right now output that comes away, you know, may not be accurate. So hence, you will not take away human in the loop. Ranjini said human in the loop. I think that's the right term to use on this innovation. Absolutely. Yeah, I just thought I'll make that so that audience understand the fact that, you know, everything comes out, believe it and go home. No, doesn't have that's not right. It won't work that way.
Knowing how to find the mistakes is, I think, the point that Nikhil said. And I think that's where experience and training and skilling will be important. And if I can come to you, right? The future of work, we've seen a lot of changes. I think the last 2 years, future of work was all about hybrid working. I think today, increasingly, the conversation will move to humans and machines in the workplace. As you are helping organizations design their workplace strategies, is this a conversation you're hearing? Is there something different you need to do around the whole future of workspace when you think about humans and machines coexisting?
Yeah, it's a because if you look at the conversation we just had, there's a couple of interesting points that I heard which were new to me to some extent. Is that at one level we're saying that there is that the ability to work with this kind of technology does not require necessarily significantly larger amounts of education, but also more intelligence and being able to adapt to it. On the other hand, also we are hearing that the creativity per se is getting, in some ways, is at least getting the generative AI is able to work with, is able to be more creative than it was earlier. So earlier we were talking about more process-oriented jobs that would be taken away. Now even more creative jobs could potentially be differently done. So there is a lot of confusion right now with regard to the fact that exactly what is it that I need to develop my people on. Is there a if you look at 3 years ago, there was, and things are changing pretty fast, because if you look at 3-4 years back, there was a very different kind of a conversation on what was important for education or capability building in organizations. In the last 3-4 years, things have changed again, and now we're talking about a new form of technology that most organizations themselves don't know what to do with. They know that there is potentially going to be an impact, but they don't know how to make that impact. But the problem is a little bit on the first principles about the fact that there isn't enough number of people for you to be trained. Because what we are seeing in most organizations today is the fact that for the last 10 or 12 years, the data has consistently shown that less than 45% of engineers in India that can actually work in any of the organizations that you have on the screen right now. And maybe the yardstick for measuring the capability for them to work in the organization is different, and maybe that will change going forward. But assuming that the yardstick remains consistent, the ability to think, be analytical, be objective, have the right skills with regard to their ability to adapt to new things, agility, etc., all of those things remain consistent, then you don't have sufficient number of people to be able to work with it. which means there's a 55% of the population that's coming out, which cannot get these kinds of opportunities. I think that is where the bigger challenge lies today, that how do we change the skilling system prior to people coming into organizations, which enables them to be able to work with the kind of technology that all of us are talking about here. And that solution is still something that has not presented itself to anybody. At least I don't see that happening anywhere else. As a matter of fact, what I'm seeing is now with things like Chegg and the fact that now generative AI has led to Chegg's share price going down, etc., etc. I think we're making, in some ways, we're trying to make that entire education capability building system a little bit more less. I'm looking for the right word for it, but maybe it's just less serious. We're trying to make it more of a plaything to say that just because something can answer your questions for you, that's a good way for you to be trained or taught. That's I at least at this point in time, I don't think that's the right way to think about this entire education or skilling challenge that we have today.
Very interesting. Yeah, very interesting point, Andy, that somewhere in the the excitement around ChatGPT, they're making it sound very simple and maybe undermining the importance of overall education. And Anjani, if I was to come to you, right, how do you think we should be thinking about skilling both at a college school level as well as at a reskilling level, right? What is it that's important, and how do you drive the fundamentals and the foundational skills don't go away, and you're only having to add on top of that, which is all this creative reasoning, analytical skills. But how does it all come together?
No, absolutely. And that's something I think about a lot as a mother of an 8-year-old, right? I'm very curious about how the world will be very different for her versus the one we grew up in. So first of all, right, all the points the speakers before me made, such relevant points over there. So I talked to a lot of startups. I've been talking to VCs, and one of the things which strike me is 8 out of 10, it's more like hammer in search of a nail, right? Versus actually solving the problem in itself. Sometimes I wonder if there's the focus on jobs to be done. What's the real problem we are solving? And then how are we using technology to solve the problem? So I think when we talk about reskilling and how do we enable our talent and workforce, I think the basic fundamentals remain the same, right? With Gen AI, that's not going to go away. Problem first, tech second. That is like a thumb rule, which I would love for all of us to follow. And I'll give you an example about where human intelligence, I think Sandeep alluded to this, right? Where human intelligence actually can bring in and make a huge difference. So now there are multiple ways to cross a river. So if the problem is, okay, I want to cross a river, and if my prompt is build me a faster bridge or a faster boat, for example, right? That's what the LLM is going to give me, right? But if you can think about, okay, how do I want to cross? Why do I want to cross? You can take a boat, you can take a bridge, you can swim across, right? So before you decide, should I build a better boat, to pause to say, is there a faster way to do this? I think that's where human complementary skills come in, right? Around creativity and everything else we spoke about. And I think that's important. So my advice, first of all, for the present generation is to be autodidactic, as they say, right? Like to master self-learning. And those who can do that are the ones who can thrive in this machine-generated world, right? And we are all, like I keep saying, at the starting point, right? And this is a good place for us to play a level playing field, to have a level playing field. Now, the second point you mentioned in terms of how do we, enable our future generations, and I think that's very important as well. Like the stuff which Sal Khan and Khan Academy are doing is fabulous, right? Like while integrating that into the core curriculum itself. I try to explain the concepts to my daughter, because at the end of the day, if you keep that away, that's not going to help them, right? Helping them use this, but use it responsibly, I think is the key. And that's a responsibility each of us hold, as well as our schools and our education curriculum hold, so that when we pass out, like someone alluded, we don't have 45% of the workforce which is not eligible to participate, right? So that we can build a better workforce who can work complementary by using what's uniquely human, like the creativity which we spoke about. That's what I would probably focus on.
Sangeeta, if I may add a point, right, to Andy's point, that's a big dichotomy that's happening, right? He's right, absolutely right. I think on one hand, we say ChatGPT can solve a lot of problems. On the other hand, we don't have skilled workforce. And I personally teach in a lot of colleges as well, right? So my fundamental challenge over there is that we are only scaling the surface in academic institutions. When kids come to us as an intern, they say we know ML and AI. but they do not know probability, they do not know statistics, they do not know linear algebra, which is absolutely needed for some of these things, right? Generative AI has not changed those fundamentals. It's just that it's given a layer on top of it to say, look, because you could discriminate, you can now generate. I think that's very important from an academic point of view, right? So the academic world needs to take cognizance of that fact and drill in those basics into students. And those basics are really mathematics. Those basics are really fundamentals of probability, fundamentals of statistics. And not just go to the hype and say, look, I can make an MLAI model. You are an AI engineer, or you've done a BTech in AI and I'll give you a degree, right? That's where Andy said 45%, I'm saying 90% of workforce does not apply AI. It's basically either on PPTs or by saying that I know what AI can do. And the net resultant is 15% of customers, I told even in a previous conversation, only apply AI in production scaling. Only 15% across. The rest of them are very reluctant. And about 90% of people working in the enterprise mode don't really know the nitty-gritty of where to apply. And that's where you have a challenge. And one of the other challenges is we have not taken India as a test bed. That's a huge concern for us. I think we've got enough use cases in the country. If we start applying it, we can start applying small little AIs over there so people would get to know what's going on over there. So we start looking at what's happening in the world, in US and UK, and suddenly start applying it over here. But we don't have enough test bed in the country. If we do that, if that problem gets sorted out, test beds of the country, there's huge use cases for vernacular usage of AI and generative AI that we can use in this country as well. And some of us are working on top of it. And also then saying that, look, academics have to change. They have to become more practical. They have to become more deep-rooted. That should solve the problem for an IT services or an IT company to absorb some of these tools.
So you're really saying it's not so much about teaching AI or teaching generative AI. It's about the fundamentals of mathematics, probability, statistics, analytical thinking.
It's the fundamentals that fail us. It's not teaching, right? Kids who want to learn, they can actually self-learn themselves.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Sandeep, I was to come to you. I know last time you were telling us about this whole but this is like search. Prompt engineering is like search, but nobody really taught us search, right? I mean, all of us learned as we went along, but I think given the hype cycle that we are right now in, and prompt engineering is becoming a career, how does that work, right? I mean, is it a career for coders? Is it a career for content creators? How does it work? And is that a sustainable career, or how do you think about it?
Interesting one, Sangeeta. Here's the reality. Now, I brought in that example of search because nobody taught us how to search in Google or a Bing for that matter, right? It's meant to be natural. I have to look for something. I ask a question. Now, over a period of time, I understand the response I'm getting, and I try to change the way I ask questions. This is going to go in the similar fashion. So you'll initially try to play with this Copilot. The Copilot probably is not giving the right answer. You blame Copilot or something else. But period of time, you realize that, hey, probably it's time for me to go and reflect on, am I doing the right thing, right? So prompt engineering, another wave, honestly, because I don't understand this. The reason I'm saying this is I recently saw an ad saying there's a company which is selling prompts, right? So their business model is we'll give you domain-based prompts that you can use it. Very valid for sure. But here's the thinking: in the B2B world, it needs a good amount of skilling for people to stay productive at job, right? If I have to use, let's say, my fashion GPT from Myntra, I'm a consumer. I don't need you can't train consumer base. Hey, this is how we should use Mr. It doesn't make sense, right? So I will, behind the scenes, it's a black box to consumer. Behind the scenes, I'll have to understand what's being asked, add additional prompts to the question being asked, and make response more relevant for consumers. Yeah. So in the B2B space, you will basically go towards educating people on how best to use it so that you can stay productive. How can you do more? How can you do effectively using this? Hey, there is a way to use this. Again, same the Ferrari example, the example I gave earlier. Now for consumers, as creators, you will have to get smarter in adding additional prompts. For example, today when you use the Bing image creator, or let's say we have a product called Microsoft Designer. When you use a designer, you're asking it's powered by DALL-E, which is again another innovation which generates natural language prompts to visual description, visual art. So you ask a question saying, I'm looking for, or create an image for me where a couple is walking on the beach on the sunset. Now, do you want a panoramic view? You want to photographic, top view, perspective view? What do you want? Those choices, something which you probably want to prompt to the user, or automatically add something which is generic stuff. So both ends, innovation needs to happen, and it's a trail all of us have to walk in. Again, I don't want to go back to printing press. Again, as Ranjini said, I want to stick to iPhone movement because that's relatable. So when phones came in, we have to switch from using the big brick to the touch screen. So that's a moment here. We have to learn a lot of unlearning in terms of the way we look at things, but look at this innovation and try to see how best we can make it reality for all of us. It's about making reality. It's out there. It's not something in future. We always look at innovation saying disruptive innovation. 2 years on the line coming in. No, this is here this morning for us to use it.
So Nikhil, if I was to stay on the same question on prompt engineering, since it occupies so much mind space, right? How are you thinking about it from a Tech Mahindra perspective?
No, I think we're using it. We've now become prompt engineers, right? But
from a reskilling perspective, I mean, each one of us will try and learn, but is there a reskilling around prompt engineering?
So at least few of our engineers, right, who are MLAI, we have actually asked them to do the prompt engineering courses. There are a lot of them who are in Udemy, etc. But I think I still find that I can't write these prompts well. But there are people who can write. I think it's an inherent way of asking those questions and asking those questions rightly, which of course can be trained using these prompt engineering courses, but then it also comes inherently, right? I am more of an opinion that I should go behind the scenes and search it rather than asking it more and more questions here, which is my way. But I think everybody has their own way of looking at things. I have some engineers who write beautiful prompts and get the answers correctly. I have some of them who can't, for the life of theirs, write a prompt and get an answer. And for them, they'll use their SDKs to say or find out where exactly a similar prompt has been written. But yeah, it has become a cue for us to train our engineers. We are training them on prompt engineering. But what we are also training them to see is you use prompts, but are you using it in context which you are trying to give, right? So, which is very, very important in terms of an enterprise use case. So that's what we are trying. But yeah, it's again a big if and but between who can do prompt engineering well.
Yeah. No, that's just the one career everybody's now talking about. So I said, let's try and demystify that for our audience. Ranjini, you have anything to add on prompt engineering?
I think a lot of stuff was covered over there, right? I remember reading that prompt engineering is probably like the last job which we would have as humans. But here's the thing, right? Honestly, I feel like right now there's such a hype around, how do we get to write prompts? How do we get to, but if anyone of the audience have played with AutoGPT, even that is kind of going away, right? Where the only intervention will be to say yes or no, and everything else will be taken care of the machine. So I would say focus, like someone rightly called out, on the fundamentals versus the hype, and that's what would sustain us and keep us relevant for longer.
I have one more question, Sandeep, for you, which is really, I think we've also heard a lot of the current wave of Gen AI is all about English, right? And it will be people who can speak English will do better. So does that create another divide, right? Especially in a country like India, which is so multilingual, right?
No, absolutely. By the way, if you look at right now, if you look at the innovation, we're heading on a trail, walking on a trail where it's going to be, first of all, multimodal. ChatGPT is text in, text out, but if you look at the GPT-4, which is the latest version, right now the image input is in private beta, but multimodal, that means I should be able to show the model data variety and reason with it, not just text. I can show an image, audio, video. That's a future. On the other hand, multilingual, right? So right now, these models, by the way, they can respond to you in 100 plus languages. So it's called MMLU, massive multitask language understanding. That means imagine ask a question in English. The question comes back in, let's say, in English, and I ask the next question in a different language. The model has to understand the chain of thought prompting. That's the innovation. So these are reasoning models which will hold on to the context that you want it to. It has no understanding of intent, but context what hold on to. But absolutely right, multilingual is necessary. I'll give you a simple example. G20 Sherpa Summit happened in Kumarakom on March 31st. And nasscom, again, the team reached out saying, hey, we have digital public infrastructure, which is Diksha. Diksha is basically the national teacher training platforms. Hey, there is a K-12 curriculum there. We'll give you 12th grade physics, chemistry, and accountancy subjects. Can you build a generative AI layer on top of it, helping parents or anybody else to understand what's the curriculum and syllabus and teach the students better? So the ask was built in G20 languages, right? So I will ask question. In fact, for India, we actually enabled for Tamil, Telugu, and Hindi. You could ask, hey, explain Newton's third law of motion. In Hindi, Tamil, or Telugu, and it comes back in your own language. So speech is a solved problem, but of course, inherently, this model having that MMLU capability and eventually multimodal will be not too far. In my view, the world future would be multimodal, multilingual to greater extent. That's where you'll reap the benefits. Everybody can't prompt anything. It doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
And sorry, and if I may add, that's the essence of AGI, right? So while we speak textually and you're listening to my thoughts, if you can't see my expressions, you can't understand what I'm trying to talk, right? So I think multimodal is the way to go, and there are different ways to approach it. I think that's the real essence in the future. Which is
sorry, I mean, that's crazy if you imagine, right? Because imagine now models have no conscious, right? All of us know that, and they can't know emotions in what context you're asking. Now with computer vision coming in, your emotions while you're asking questions can be translated to some kind of I would say prompt, right? Hey, this person asking the question, he seems to be angry, he seems to be in a distress situation, looks like surrounding a lot of people, so can you be a little more empathetic in response, right? The empathy kind of stuff, model may not know in what context it has to respond to you. So those things has to be dealt. Otherwise, it's no meaning. It's like garbage in, garbage out.
And it's very close to the neuroscience facets as well, right? So neuroscience also says that when you're speaking, if I say that I'm eating an apple right now, right here, about all of you would have thought about that apple. You would have also thought about the crunch in the apple. Some of you would have even looked at the Apple logo in your mind, right? At some back process would have hit. So that neural process is also guiding how you look at both textual inputs, visual inputs together. And that's what makes the world, for you, in terms of what you are experiencing with your senses. So those multimodal facets are a huge, huge advantage. And that's getting us closer to AGI or maybe super intelligence.
It brings me really, the AGI super intelligence brings me to the last segment, and I know we have some audience questions, so we'll keep this short. But really, I think there is a lot of fear also about what's going to happen with generative AI, AGI, super intelligence, whatever you want to call it. Part of it we've covered, job displacement, so I'm not going to go to that part. But what are I think some of the key risks that we are seeing ahead? I know there's talk of regulation, there's talk of self-governance, responsible AI, data, and biases that we've talked about. But if each of you could talk really about what are the big 2-3 risks that you are seeing, and how do you think as organizations we should be safeguarding proactively, given we are still very, very early in the journey? There will be new things that keep coming up, and it can't be that I've built this framework and now this is what it will be, because this technology is moving so fast. So how do you build an environment where you can continuously evaluate new risks that may come up and stay ahead of that? So Ranjini, if you want to start with that.
Yeah, no, such a pertinent question, right? And I think there was a question in one of the comments calling out, what's the implications of AI generated images? And this recently, if you guys follow the news, there was some repercussions of that. There was an AI generated image around explosion, which caused ripples downstream,
the
right?
Pentagon one,
Yeah, exactly. And it's very real. It's not like science fiction. And someone spoke about sentience. I remember, I just recall this book I read about sentience, but it's not sci-fi anymore. It's just around us, right? So it begs the question, how do we tag, or how do we know whether any content, not just images, right? Any content is AI generated or not? This is really nice article, I think Noam Chomsky wrote around blurry JPEG, right? So if there's constantly AI generated information and then human generated information, like think about a Xerox copy, right? You keep taking copy of copy of copy of copy. And at the end of it, you end up with like such a poor replica of the original. Would we as humanity and internet end up with that, right? With the surplus of all of these copies. So then how do we tag AI generated images versus human content? How do we provide authorship of this? That's like a big open question. I know there is AI detection software and fraud detection, but for a common man, if I look at something, how do I know that is this true? Is it not true? Right? Like, I think those are questions a lot of companies are thinking about. Again, when we talk about spam, the other thing I spoke to one of my podcast guests about is around voice AI. There's huge amounts of spam happening around that space itself, right? Like, say, if I were to clone your voice and talk to your relative, completely frauding her about your personal details, asking her to divulge personal details. That's something which is happening right now. And people like my mom, how do they be aware of this completely new tech, right? And we spoke about medicine and healthcare. Like, drug discovery can be such a huge enabler, and generative AI can be a huge differentiator there. But if we are doing things around drug discovery, if we do not have a diverse enough data, if we do not take into consideration the ethics behind what we're doing, how do we ensure that that happens, right? So I think all of these are very evolving spaces, Sangeeta. For me, at the end of it, for us to have the full potential of AI, it's very important that we think about how do we minimize risks and maximize social benefits, right? And this is absolutely true across critical domains like healthcare, finance, any AI systems, right? And again, multiple ways to do this. And without getting into details, good list for us to think about is, are we building AI with explainability? Are we building it with transparency, reproducibility, fairness, privacy, accountability, right? Things like this, which is not just a checklist item, but something which we completely focus on. And at the end of the day, have a more human-centered approach to building AI, right? And ensuring that it is there across every step of the life cycle, not just at the last mile. I think all of that is critical and important when we think about building trustworthy AI systems.
And if you want to come on that.
I mean, there is actually very little to add beyond this, frankly, because and to a large extent, we are all very clearly, acutely aware of all the challenges that this might bring in. The formal ones, like Ranjani was mentioning, as well as informal ones that are the impact of the formal ones, the privacy, trust, accuracy, etc. I was reading this funny news item in the New York Times recently where there was this one case where the lawyer apparently had used ChatGPT and came up with four examples of past judgments. All four of them were apparently untrue. None of them were actually of any relevance. And
that's just somebody being very lazy, right? I mean, not checking
and that
the facts. So.
And Sangeeta, I think that is my bigger worry, because does this promote oversimplifying things? Does it lead to more laziness in our thinking, which may not have? See, in some ways we are becoming lazier over a period of time. We are finding answers more easily available to us, and I'm happy to be challenged on this. But I think the way learning was 50 years ago vis-a-vis the way we are learning today, I think there has been a significant change, and we have become lazier in our learning. I can do mental maths because when I was preparing for my CAT, I had to do it. My kid will never do mental maths. Now, you could argue that it's not even required anymore, but at some level, I see more value in having done. With all of this, are we making the larger way where people learn and are required to apply their learning easier for them? And I'm oversimplifying and looking at only the ChatGPT kind of stuff, which is more of what we are seeing, at least at an individual level. But that's my fear, that we are probably just simplifying things a lot more than is required, perhaps, particularly when it comes to education learning.
Good point. Sandeep, I was to come to you, right? There was a recent article, I think it's a report by BCG and MIT Sloan, where they're talking about, I think many organizations, at least the more evolved ones, already had responsible AI frameworks, but generative AI has made it harder for them because the tools that they're using on generative AI, they do not know what has gone in them, right? So how do you think about responsible AI in an environment like that, right? Because you don't know what's behind OpenAI, right? Or behind ChatGPT or DALL-E. Nobody has that answer, right? So.
Absolutely, Sangeeta. So two ways of looking at it. Number one, if you look at these large language models, I think bulk of the effort from OpenAI and Microsoft, I'm specifically talking about the OpenAI innovations, significant effort is going in as we speak to ensure responsible design principles, be it privacy, accountability, security, all the stuff has been taken care. And also ability for us to put guardrails. See, this guardrail aspect is very critical. I think Ranjini mentioned Khan Academy earlier. Look, that's probably a classic evidence in terms of how it's called model steerability. How we can steer the model to operate in a guardrails that you give for the model. That means the model, which Khan Academy is qualifying it as a Khan Migo. That's the chatbot. It's a student tutor. It is been told to operate in a Socratic style. That will never give an answer in the first shot, which is what academia was worried about. Hey, you know what? My children are solving problems in ChatGPT. Where are they learning? So now, this is meant to be a tutorish way of doing it. So future, as I've also heard about from Sam Altman saying future, of course, they're asking for regulatory. Regulate us is the point of view there. So ability for us to put guardrails at the country level, right? Depending on the privacy laws. And second, at the business level, what is the guardrails that you want the model to keep in mind while responding to your business questions? If it is a healthcare, let's take a doctor. Doctor's asking questions saying, hey, should I prescribe this medicine to the patient? I mean, the model right now will say, hey, no, I'm not qualified to answer this question because you're the expert. Now, can I tell the model, hey, never, you can always give me response basis as Apollo. I'm Apollo Hospital. I've done these things. Just give me a second opinion, right? But don't give judgment on this case. I can always say that. That means, the model is not going to give you answer, but it will probably tell you historically this is what has happened. Likelihood of this medicine having effect with such patients is so and so %. It's your take going forward. So the future, I mean, honestly, right now it's very early stage. By the way, we're talking so much about this innovation. It's a 4-month-old baby. It's a 4-month-old baby because it generally went available in the month of January, of course, for 4-5 months. But responsible AI and guardrails, I think that is front and center. And it's not a one-time fits all, right? It has to be relentless pursuit. As people are using it, you will know how people use it and then again put guardrails. So it's an iterative approach, and the world will evolve with this iterative approach. And one fine day we'll realize, hey, you know what? Ability for us to put guardrails is very meaningful. Now that's when probably things will move faster. Right now, it's still wait and watch for many to make sure that this is meaningfully applied. But I'm bullish about this. I'm very bullish about it in terms of what it can do. The question is, can you instruct what it should do? Right. That's where the magic wand is. Otherwise, it will eventually can be runaway AI. We don't want that to happen. It has to be with what it should do, and I decide as a business or a country in terms of what this should do in Germany, in Italy, where people did speak about this, or in India for that matter. I think Sam Altman agrees on this. He makes this point clearly saying, regulators, but again, when we are moving towards this reasoning engine to be instructed, right? That's a future. That's a future.
So Nikhil, if I was building on this question for you, if you see the Sam Altman hearing, Senate hearing, you have Gary Marcus there saying, as scientists, as researchers, we should know better what's gone behind these models. And I don't know whether that scenario will be available or not. So as an enterprise, how are you thinking about responsible AI when you are deploying some of these models in the organization?
Look, so I don't like the term responsible AI, right? So there's no responsibility after you've set the model in motion, right? So you can't control it. And as a result of that, I rather like the term explainable AI, because I think that's the biggest challenge at this point in time. So we can't explain it, right? So and neural networks in general are a black box, so you can't really explain what's happening. My biggest fear is, then I'll come to the fear and what we're doing for enterprises, is the fear for kids. I think a large part of what you're seeing is also being fed to kids via toys, via Internet of Toys, as we call them today, or via other channels where people and kids speak. So I need a much more robust system to actually do one much more explainable kind of a format of AI for these kids so that it doesn't go bad. And my model should be, I should have a kill switch to tell a model, look, you're not being explainable here. You're actually just picking up things. And if you want to call it responsible, that's one of those facets, right? My Second biggest worry is when we call bias. I think all of us have biases.
Yeah.
And I think a large number of research is today going in the wrong direction to actually control biases. I don't think that is where the research should go. I think the research should really go in terms of explaining models. And I think if I can explain model why it did what it wanted to, I think I'm at a good space with AI. Today, our biggest challenge for explainable AI is that we can't really tell you that Ranjani wanted a loan as much as Sandeep. Why should I be giving a loan to Ranjani and why should I not give it to Sandeep? Very simple. And this is where the grassroots really gets hit. What we are doing, and this is a project that we have done with World Economic Forum for Rwanda, was something what Sandeep was alluding to. This is a healthcare chatbot. And the reason why you saw chatbots going out of fashion was because their boundary was suddenly controlled and they were pegged back because of this furor about responsible AI. So in Rwanda, what we've done is chatbots are divided into 3 sectors. If you ask them and you tell them, I have got 102 degrees fever, the chatbot suddenly doesn't react and say, you've got COVID, because that's the flavor of the season. It says, go get yourself checked from a doctor, figure out what your pulse rate is, so on and so forth. And if you say, look, I've got a sore throat, I've got 102 fever, it's not going for the last 3-4 days, the chatbot still doesn't respond, you've got COVID, even though these symptoms are very valid for a COVID scenario. So there are these guardrails and these boundary boxes that are being kept, right? And that's the reason why you saw chatbots going out of fashion. They suddenly became boundary contextualized. It was not just an open way in which chatbots could function, right? So I think what we are doing from an industry standpoint, we don't have an answer at this point. I cannot explain AI at this point. And there's a lot of work that is going on, mixing some of the neural networks in language, which is transformers, which is the GPT sector, symbolics in certain ways. Can I give symbolism in terms of what we are trying to produce as an answer? And also going back to the old Bayesian philosophy, if some of you may remember the probabilism, to say, look, probabilistically, the world may behave in this fashion. And that's why the answer is coming this way. These combination is a kind of research that is today happening. For us, when we go to a customer and the customer says, look, I don't believe in this model which is giving an answer, all we have to do is do a little bit of backtracking and tell them, look, this was the data. This is what we think from a human perspective should be an answer. It's probably there close by what it's trying to give you, but it's a very close by kind of an association that we are making. We still don't have the ability to do a cause and effect relationship. We can do cause and effect, but we don't have the reverse. We do not do we cannot go from effect to cause. If an effect has happened, we do not know what to generate as a cause. And that's the biggest challenge with AI at this point. And that's my biggest fear.
I think very well articulated, Nikhil. And I think the good part which I heard across the panel is that I think the focus on responsibility, trustworthiness, explainability is at as much as the forefront as is adoption and innovation, right? So it's not about, let me make the most of it and then I'll worry about the risk. So I think we've seen that. I'll just quickly move to some audience questions. I know we are in less than a few minutes. There's a question on regulation. We are already behind the world in framing data privacy laws. If like EU has done GDPR, etc. If anybody would like to go at it, or I can answer it really. So India does have a digital data protection bill that it's been drafted and it is currently awaiting Parliament approval. So we are hoping that India will have a digital data protection law very, very quickly for all of us. So can any one of our co-speakers kindly tell us the genuine amount of effort that Indian government is doing? Okay, I think we've covered this, the laws. The question. We've seen limited full-scale adoption of most new tech, AI, blockchain, etc. What's your sense about how far could Gen AI proceed in terms of enterprise adoption before something else comes up, say 3 to 5 years from now or sooner? How do their organizations think about their investments? So Sandeep, if you want to start with it, right? Today it's about Gen AI, all the money is going into the co-pilots, tomorrow it'll be something else, and then it's something else. So how do you think about investment versus ROI, right?
Yeah, see, for a long time, we always look for what is the true promise of AI, right? I think it's beginning of that promise, because this is, when blockchain came in, IoT came in, nobody said it is disruptive to an extent of, hey, this is an iPhone moment or a calculator moment. So hence, when people said, we saw many winters of AI, and as the CEO rightly said, we are seeing brighter side of AI right now. It's sunny. So I think this is truly disruptive in its existence. I think a lot of investments are going in, and if you look at the startup ecosystem, I think if there's an AI element, yes, there's money coming in there. Unlike any other innovation so far, this is real. Let's put it that way. I mean, hence so much of attention it's garnered. And the fact of the matter that ChatGPT is put on the outside world is also to realize how will world react to it. Give time for them to adapt. Put regulation in place. Unlike other innovations where regulation was put after it bloated. See, look at Web 2.0. We fixed OTP after 2 decades. We never had OTP at the beginning of web. I mean, who realized we need multi-factor authentication. So hence, people are saying before Gen AI becomes mainstream, which is still in its infancy, fix issues which may have it, be it explainable AI or anything for that matter, and then proceed. So it's real here and now.
Yeah, if I may add to Sandeep's point, right? Add a little bit of.
Nikhil, we lost you. I think we've just lost Nikhil for a second. He should be back. I'm just trying to see what are the other questions that we've not covered already.
Persistence to it. I think.
Nikhil, we lost you in the beginning, so you can restart.
Sorry, I thought generative AI pushed me out because the timing was over. But
no, we still have a few minutes. So.
But I was just adding to what Sandeep said, right? Have a little bit of persistence built in. Too long have we seen that IT companies and companies shift from places to places. But I think this is one technology where you can persist. And you can invest with persistence. It has got a long scope and it's got a long tail to cover as well. That's what I want to.
Maybe Rangini, if I can take this question with you, which is really saying considerations, responsible use, privacy, etc. on one hand, and realistic and creative outputs in all spheres. I believe the question is not going to be getting ready to embrace the new technology, as we will always accept and learn anything in the future. Question is how fast and long this change is coming up. So, previous generations of technology have taken much, much, much longer, right? So I think the example Sandeep was giving, OTP took us 20 years or whatever before the web became mainstream. But generative AI is going to be much, much faster, or future eras or whatever AI is going to be. So how do you prepare for that?
Yeah, no, that premise is quite true, right? We tend to think that changes happen linearly, but tech moves exponentially. So the rate of change and adoption is exponential, and it does continue to happen, going to happen, right? So again, when we think about how do we upskill ourselves, it comes back to what we've been talking about, right? Not so great way to go about it is to fall into the hype and try to pick up every single course which is available and look at quick ways to make money. I think the key is to kind of think about it more again in terms of fundamentals and think about what is not going to change, like first principles, right? To say, okay, how are we going to solve the problem? Because irrespective of what change is going to happen within the technology, like I keep saying, problem comes first and tech comes second, right? To start with, how do we solve it, and then how do we bring in the right technology to solve it? So amongst all of the startups I've been talking to, the ones who have actually come closer to the PMF are the ones who are looking at solving genuine problems and then thinking about what is the technology which we can use to solve the problems. And that is not going to go away, right? So I would say think from first principles, work on fundamentals, which will continue to remain irrespective of how the technology changes, rather than spending a lot of time thinking about what is going to change and when is it going to change. That's what I leave you with.
Nikhil, if I can come to the next question for you, which is saying IT services organizations might deploy blanket bans across organizations out of fear of security breaches. How do companies implement privacy and security while also enabling employees to use Gen AI?
Yeah, so I think there are two facets of Gen AI. I think one is, of course, the code part of it. And I think that is where companies would be a little reluctant in terms of looking at GitHub Copilot. And I think that has to be in accordance with the customer from an IT services standpoint, right? So whenever I put something of my code along with a kind of generative code in a customer premise, the customer has to be taken into cognizance. So there's no blanket ban. The idea is if you want to use GitHub Copilot, just tell your customers what you're trying to do and get cognizance and get into also with people like Sandeep, right? So we keep talking to him. what happens when this code is written, what will happen to these things, right? And we've been talking to Microsoft for a long period of time now. So get in cognizance with your customer, get in cognizance with what you want.
I think Nikhil has a bad connection. Okay, I think we just take the last question, which is really saying, at a leadership level, if I want to learn about generative AI, what's your recommendation? Are there books that I should be reading? Are there podcasts, videos? So, love to get perspectives from any of you. So.
Maybe I'll add this, Sangeeta, right? Honestly, I used to have this Excel, right? I'll note down every single link which comes in and save multiple LinkedIn posts. I gave up. Like the FOMO I had, I gave up because it's just not something you can keep up with, right? Every single day I come across like 10 tools which says, oh, these are tools which you should have. But honestly, I don't think that is sustainable or scalable for us, for any human to kind of get to that, right? So I would say start with, again, what is it that you want to learn? So for example, I was very curious to understand how is the market's going to evolve? What does the tech stack look like? Like most people talk very superficially, right? But if you ask questions in terms of how's the tech stack look like? Where are people playing right now? Where are the corporates playing? Who are the ones who are doing well? Which level are they playing in? Are they across vertically? Are they playing only at the application layer? I think if you start asking these questions and then start researching according to that, that will take you down a rabbit hole, which helps you understand versus picking up things which, again, I'm not discrediting any course per se, but start genuinely with the problems you want to understand and then go down that rabbit hole. I think that's one. But also another thing is I found like people who are actually working in this space have very solid content. I know like Andrej Karpathy has like this really nice video which he has explaining this. Wolfram Alpha has a good space to start around. Anyone who wants like a 101 around ChatGPT and how it works. So I'd say start with the source, right? And look at what they are putting out there as experts versus anything you come across by influencers, so to speak. So that's what I'll leave you with.
Yeah, I so agree. I think there's just such an information overload that knowing what to look for is very important. Sandeep, any advice you have?
No, I plus one to Ranjani. I personally follow these key leaders who are the creators, because by the time it comes to us through media and other resource, it gets morphed into something else. So I would always follow the leaders. Hence, if I go to Sam Altman, because we all have to listen to him because he knows what's gone behind it, and not look at any other news to consume that. So if you're a leader, if you're looking at understanding this, I would say stay on this trail and relentlessly listen to these leaders. There's no need, I would say, no need for a program yet. It still is infancy, but just follow to understand what's happening in reality and form your own perspectives.
Yeah, and don't get onto the FOMO trail. Andy, any suggestions from you?
No, just that there are some VC firms that have fantastic content, Anderson Horowitz, etc. I think, and not much beyond that.
Okay. Thank you so much for this wonderful discussion. I think really enjoyed the diverse perspectives that we could get here. I hope the audience enjoyed it too, but really appreciate Sandeep, Ranjani, Andy, and Nikhil in absentia for your time, and look forward to many more such sessions because, like we said, it's still in its infancy and there's a long, long way to go. So we'll come back to you, request your participation in future sessions also.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Diksha, back to you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. Very, very interesting. You got me excited about GenAI. I was confused before this thing started. Now I know how to proceed. I was also going through this FOMO period, but you've given me a sort of focus on GenAI. I'll start on the journey as well. Thank you to the audience for attending this session. Like I mentioned, the recording will be uploaded on a YouTube channel, and I will be sending a link to all of you. Request you to listen to it again if required. Thank you so much, leaders. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, Diksha. Thank you all. Thank you.
Bye.
Apologies, Sangeeta, for the connection.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. See you guys.